All right. What is up, everybody? Joshua Smith here with another GSD Mode podcast. And today, you guys, I'm here with my good friend and my personal coach, Kamille Rose Taylor. I always want to still say, and then you just got married, got the new name, getting adjusted to that.
I get it.
But yeah, I mean, this is a repeat. You've been on before, and anybody that's watching this, that's part of the GSD Mode, family, if you will, with coaching or with teammates. You come on consistently and you're coaching us privately as well. And just in case anybody that's watching and listening, this is your first experience with Kamille and you haven't heard our previous podcast and so forth. So Kamille and I met just about 5 years ago. She's been my peak performance coach, so mindset coach, if you will, for the last 5 years. And the hardest thing that I've found when it comes to business, life, any of it, it's like the plans are easy. It's like, okay, hey, I got to go out there and eat these meals, do this workout, I lose the weight. I go do these activities, these actions in my business is good. So it's like, that's the easy stuff. The hard stuff is this damn thing up here. Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's like, I found that when people say, oh, mindset's 80%, I'm like, dude, I think this is like 99.9% of it. Like, it's like, why am I not doing the things I know I should be doing to create those results I know I truly want, but I still, I choose to, eat the I don't know, Twinkie versus the broccoli or whatever it may be, we've been working together for, 5+ years. And I always joke and say that you're stuck with me until the day you either fire me or you retire.
All good.
But how things been?
Man, amazing. I know we were talking a little bit before this recording, but life is good. So it's interesting to me because when I started my company back in 2016, it's called The Ultimate Life. I think you can kind of see it there in the video. And LYFE stands for Live Your Fullest Every Day. Now, the cool thing about that is it's a fun name, right? It gives a lot of people motivation, but then it's a lot of accountability for me to live out my ultimate life, right? It's like, I can't have a company called The Ultimate Life if I'm not also striving for the same. So while my life is certainly not perfect, I am very blessed, very happy. Since our last podcast 5 years ago, obviously a lot's changed. So I got married. I was able to hit one of my goals, which is about to fully retire my mom, which is happening in like 3-4 weeks from the recording of this podcast. Got her a house, which was another big goal for me when I first started my business. So it's just been a lot of really cool things, but they've all been like, 7 years in the making, right? It's kind of like the 1% thing every day. Just keep doing these consistency things, the things we talk about all the time, mindset. It doesn't come without its struggles, but I'm able to create physically what I've been envisioning in my mind and my heart for years, but it's definitely not overnight, right? It's just like all these little things I do every day to become the person that I wanted to see create these things. Like you said on your wall right there, be more. So it wasn't so much about having more, achieving more, but I had to really become that person. Because straight up 5 years ago when we recorded, I'm so glad. I still get hit up by a lot of people saying how much that podcast has like helped them, which I think is so beautiful. But what a lot of people don't know is when we were recording that, I still felt like a total imposter. I still felt so insecure. Like, who am I to say any of these things to this guy, like you at the time before we started working together, about, how to really live out your ultimate life as an entrepreneur, as a high achieving individual. Like I really struggled. And sometimes when I watch that video, I look at her and I'm like, man, I know what you're going through, girl. Like, you're going to be okay. It's almost, I want to tell her, we're going to get there. Like all the doubts she felt, all the loneliness she felt trying to build her brand and her business, it's only 5 years later, but if I could show her what we've created now, I think she would be really excited to keep going versus I remember what I felt then. Again, even if you couldn't see it behind the podcast, I was really struggling in my own mindset. And it's not because I didn't believe all the things I was doing for other people, but I'm human too. Yeah. So, I get it. I really do. But having community, having support, like talking to you every week too, even though I was coaching you, I was also really inspired by your desire to just be more, have more, do more with everything you were struggling with, running multiple businesses, your kids, your wife. It's not easy. And I know that, you've also overcome a lot in your health. So the discipline it takes for you not to eat the Twinkie over, whatever, avocado and hard-boiled eggs. Like, I don't think people realize it because they look at you and they think, oh yeah, Josh, he's just fit. He's so disciplined, but they don't know that you really like Taco Bell. Like you want to go for the not so good stuff. You're just like everybody else. So yeah, life is good. Life is blessed. The
struggle is real for all of us, and I don't think that sometimes we it's easy for all of us. Well, I shouldn't say for all of us, because then I'm making assumptions. But I mean, for me, I found myself guilty of this many, 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 many times throughout my life, of putting people on pedestals and not think, like, just assuming their situation's different, or they have all their shit together. And
Yeah.
it's like, no, dude, we're all going through, and I don't want to say we're all going through the same stuff at the same time. And, there's differences to different situations, but we all go through, experience our own shit, hard times, good times, like it's a challenge. And so what is it that you do? So for those of that's watching here, like, I've mentioned that you've been my personal, coach, and the longest one-on-one coach I've ever had. But like, for somebody that's kind of curious, like, what do you do? What would you sum that up as, when it comes to the work that you do?
Yeah. So I would say the problem is that entrepreneurs especially are so driven, so excited to create these life of the dreams, and they know they have a lot of capabilities inside of them. But like you said, the thing that gets in their way the most isn't the drive, it isn't the work ethic, it's the mindset, it's the psychology. And it's hard because they often don't have somebody to bounce off their thoughts with, or they feel like there's just a burden on their shoulders that who else can understand this? I can't talk to my friends, my colleagues, my wife, my husband. So who's going to help me get clarity? Should I even talk to somebody about getting clarity? Because shouldn't I know all this shit by myself? So I think that's a problem. And then it makes the journey lonely, makes the journey difficult. And then they carry a lot of shame because they know they're capable of so much more. And yet they don't know what they don't know about themselves. Right. And then that's where I come in, because I like to consider myself kind of like a perception enhancement specialist, if you will. We call it peak performance mindset coaching, but in just a short phone call, or even a short interaction. And yeah, I know you've experienced this, Josh, by having somebody who can stand in the blind spots of your life and ask you the questions that you couldn't really ask yourself. Sometimes you get the absolute clarity you need to just be like, that's what I need to do, right? Just that little 2 millimeter shift in perspective can make a huge difference in the destination that you end up in. We always like to use that analogy of kind of like an airplane, that if an airplane takes off in Los Angeles at, let's say, going towards New York, if I just change their trajectory by 3.5 degrees, doesn't seem like much in the beginning, but just that 3.5 degree change at the beginning of their route ends them up in like Argentina or something, just as an example, right? So you thought you were heading to New York, but because you started looking at things from the wrong angle, or just a small shift in the wrong direction, you end up totally somewhere else, a mud pit, a place you don't want to be. And so that's really what I do, is I'm able to help people get that alignment and clarity along the way. I often say that focus is about constantly adjusting for clarity, just like an airplane would constantly adjust its route in the air, though it looks from the outside like it's just flying straight. If you really get microscopic, that pilot is making micro adjustments all the way because the wind is pushing it, right? There's all sorts of things happening. And that's what I think people don't see about the success of certain entrepreneurs and people. Like you said, we put them up on pedestals, but I can guarantee you 90 to probably 100% of those people who have massive success have a wise counsel behind them. As a peak performance mindset coach, I get to be a part of a lot of people's wise counsel, but specifically on their mindset, like the thing that's blocking them. And then a good example, I actually had a client this week, got bombarded with an unexpected phone call, like a total hater from somebody else in the industry, wanting to pretty much sabotage their business. And it blindsided them completely. And they panicked because they felt all their emotions come up. They thought they were on the good and good, up and up rather. And they called me and they're like, hey, Coach K, I just need you for like 5 minutes because I'm really struggling. I'm about to make a really bad decision here because I think I'm just super emotional. I was like, okay, cool, let's talk. We got on the phone in like 20 minutes. This client went from panic mode, about to sabotage everything out of anger, to just feeling light, free, new perspective. And all of a sudden, it's almost like we call it the heavenly perspective on their situation. We're like, I get why it happened now. Boom, I'm going to use this to my advantage. And now they have plans that are helping their business grow like 10x because of something somebody else did that actually could have hurt them. So in 20 minutes, they probably saved themselves like 5 years of pain, because I saw the road that this person was about to go down. And I was like, ooh, are you sure you want to make that decision? And again, if you don't have wise counsel or someone you respect and trust, a professional at that, because this is what I do professionally. I'm a board certified coach. It's not like I just market myself as a coach and I'm like, let me just ask you questions I found on Google. Like
Well, and
there's a
also a
science.
psychologist by degree.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
exactly. So, I studied psychology. I went to UC Berkeley and, there's a science to coaching. There's a way to do it so that you're not leading people down the wrong path. And then there's a way to really dig into people's emotions. Um, so long way of basically saying it's to help these driven entrepreneurs stay aligned, stay clear, so then they can create their ultimate business, their ultimate life. Because it is so hard up here, as y'all know. You know what to do. You just don't know why you're not doing it. And so that's where I come in to make sure that, okay, let's figure it out so that you can understand yourself. Because everybody, I think, well, I shouldn't say everybody, many people study, like you said, the strategy, the plan, the blueprints. They want to know how to do something. But the one thing that we need to be studying the most is ourselves, because you're the one who's going to either get in the way or help execute that plan. So if you understand yourself very well, the same way you would look at the blueprint of how to run a business. If I look at my blueprint, I'm like, okay, Kamille runs like this, then I could set myself up for success knowing, okay, I get in flow when I do this. I don't get in flow when I do this. I work best with this type of person. I don't work well with this type of person. That sort of self-awareness is my game changer to create the life that I want. But if I don't know that, right, you just keep bumping up into these brick walls and you're like, what's wrong with me? And that's a question I hear people ask way too much. It's not that there's something wrong with you. The question is, what's wrong with my approach? Maybe that wasn't for you. And that's why I say self-awareness is key. So.
Yeah. The number one question that I get from whether it's real estate agents or other or entrepreneur, or maybe just somebody that's, has a corporate career, but is out of that stage of, I got to make money to pay bills and get by. Because when you're in that stage, it's like, you're not thinking about anything else other than like getting yourself to, like I've been there, I know what that's like. But then once you get to the place where it's like, okay, like the basic needs of life are taken care of. You got shelter, you got food, you got water, and so forth. So let's just say for, decently, let's just say a real estate agent that's at that point where they're making $100+ grand a year and they're able to do okay with the basic necessities.
Yeah.
The number one question then from there is that I get, especially since COVID. I mean, it's went from like getting it once a week to like 24 times a day.
Wow. Okay.
But is like, how do I figure out what I want? And there's different ways of like, what do I figure out what my purpose is? What do I figure out my whys? How do I figure out what my ultimate life is? And I don't know what it is, whether it is COVID that has people thinking differently, or, if you study, astronomy and they're talking about the alignment of the planets and how the sun aligns right now, which is creating a different magnetism, which, is bringing us into the state of awareness, who knows what it could be that is leading to this, but it seems like more people are thinking about this. And we're seeing this now with kind of the great resignation. Like people are like, hey, do I really want to go down this corporate career, or do I want to maybe go do something for my own, or, whatever it may be. But man, people get held up on that. And it's tough because we get fed all these messages. We get, I look at this as, okay, up until we're 18 years old, it's like, okay, you learn at an early age, okay, if I make mom and dad happy, life is good. Then you go to school. Okay, if I get good grades, make mom and dad happy at home, get good grades, make my teachers happy. Oh, then I start making my coaches happy. Like life is good. So you're doing everything to please all these other people. Then it's like, okay, you're 18, go figure life the fuck out. Good luck. You're like, well, wait a minute. Like my whole life, I've been indoctrinated to please all these other people, and then life is good. And now you're giving me this freedom, and it becomes difficult. A lot of people haven't really thought about like, what do I truly want versus what would make others happy. And, so I know that this would be a 20-hour long podcast to go extremely deep into, but if somebody is struggling with that, like what would you recommend, where they start? Like, cause that is such a hard question of like, what is it that I want?
Yeah, that is a great question. In fact, I actually have a couple of people I do group coaching as well. So in my group mastermind, there's a couple of people who are literally coaching with me simply because they've never asked themselves the question, what do I want? To the outside world, they are so successful. They're very talented. They're awesome at what they do in their business or their craft. But what people don't see is that they actually feel very lonely because they've just been performing for the crowd this whole time. So thank you for asking this. deep answer, the root of all of this, the fastest way to get there, but it's also the most difficult. So I'm just warning anybody who is listening to this, is you looking at what you were interested in when you were a little kid. So it's interesting. If you observe kids, there's patterns in their behavior very early on before the world, outside external forces really start to influence it. Like, and you've got 3 kiddos, so I'm sure you noticed it when you think about them when they were like 3, 4, 5, and they were just playing. Let's say they were in the house, they were on the floor, and you gave them a bunch of stuff. It's almost like a human experiment. See what they do with it, right? There might be one kid who takes all of it and they like stack it neatly. And then they're like, okay, they make like train routes or whatever. And then you might have another kid who takes it and then they use their imagination and they make this toy a person. And then they're talking to the person, or they make this thing like a microphone and then they're talking on the microphone, or somebody else just takes and they start drawing on a piece of paper and then they draw whatever. So if you notice these things when you were a little kid, what were you naturally gravitating towards? Because that innocence still, before all the outside influence comes in, is showing you what I call kind of like your God-given purpose. Like everybody has, I believe, a gift, some sort of thing they're naturally drawn to. And you'll notice that for those who live a very fulfilled life, they really are in that flow. They're doing something that is very, in a way, natural to them. They may have adapted skills to enhance it. They may have honed the craft to make it more marketable. But at the end of the day, like they were destined to do this, right? So for example, you look at someone like an Elon Musk, who's kind of this great anomaly in our time, right? He is like, wow, driving the future forward. But if you ever watch interviews of him or interviews with his mom, they talk about when he was a little kid, he was already building computers. Like that was not something trained into him. He already had a fascination for this particular type of technology. Where does that come from, right? It's not like his mom and dad were like, hey, we really want you to become the guy that creates the fastest production car on the planet that is battery operated only. Like, no, they just observed, wow, he has a talent for this. So it'll take a little bit of self-reflection for, especially for anybody who maybe had to block out their childhood for whatever reason. But if you can kind of go back and say like, you know what? I think as a little kid, I was always good at organizing, or yeah, okay, I really did like structure, or I liked playing with people, or I liked speaking. A good example of this, I didn't know this until my mom told me this, but you know, you might want to ask family friends who kind of remember you when you were little. But she said one of my favorite toys was I had this little boombox radio thing, like a plastic one with a microphone. And I would go around making announcements by myself. I was the only child. And I was like, really? She goes, mm-hmm. Every time somebody came over to the house, you'd be like, can I talk to you on my microphone? I was like, really? And she goes, yeah. So they already kind of knew that I would become some sort of communicator, public speaker, because that was the toy I gravitated to. I had dolls, I had, you know, water guns, all of that, but that was the one thing I was like, I want to talk on the microphone. So when you look at the patterns of when you were younger, it's actually going to tell you your natural kind of pull and gift for what you're probably meant to do today. Now, if you're wondering, well, Kamille, what does that have to do with my career? It's not so much what the career is, but it's how you show up in that business, right? So take, for example, if for you, Josh, you're more mechanical in the way you do things, very strategic, very well researched. And then somebody else has a business that's similar to you, but her style is she's more of a team leader. She's more of a communicator. She likes to party. You two can have almost identically the same level of success numbers in your business, but the way you operate it is so different than hers. And it would be a mistake if all of a sudden you looked at her and you're like, you know what? She's doing really well. Maybe I should just do it the way she's doing it. And yeah, maybe some things work, but it won't work nearly as well as it's working for you now because you're in your zone, right? This is you through and through. So I think part of purpose, when people are like, what am I meant to do, is finding who you authentically are, which means you kind of have to think back on what you naturally gravitated towards when you were little. And second caveat, if that's too hard, if you're like, I don't even know what I liked when I was little, well, what do you like right now? What do you kind of naturally gravitate towards? And here's a good thing. If you don't know what you like, look at what you don't like. That's always a great, because sometimes I think for people, they're better at knowing what they don't want. And once you make that list, then the opposite is probably what you do want, right? So for me, I already know I don't want to be sitting in a room by myself calculating numbers on an Excel spreadsheet. Like that's just not my thing. That's not my flow. I know it's important to my business. I need to learn it, which probably tells me I probably need to be out talking to people. I'm more of a communicator. I grow by motivating and inspiring people. That's just the way I promote my products. But for you, Josh, you know that I could be in a room by myself all day doing research. Like I prefer that. And then all your great ideas come from that. If you're around people for too long, it's probably very draining because it's like, oh, I'm gonna have to network and talk to all these folks. So you know I don't want to do this, which means I probably want to do that. So for the person listening, if you can't go back to childhood and figure out what did I naturally gravitate towards, then start with a list of what I don't want. I definitely don't want to do this. Then when you put your do want list, it's probably the opposite of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking the other day, I'm like, and I went through so many parts of my life where I'm like, what's wrong with me? And I've come to the conclusion now, this might be my own way of an out for myself, but it's like, maybe there's nothing wrong with me. Maybe I'm just trying to fit into a sick society, but it's, when you talk about like with the kids and not just what you do with it, but it's like, I have, young kids, and it's like this weekend, it was my son's birthday party, have, household full of kids. Like, what is one thing that all these kids are doing, like, regardless of maybe what their, unique, different, skill is, or unique things that they're into that might be slightly different per child. But one thing they all have in common, man, is they enjoy life and they have fun.
Yeah.
And having kids kind of brought that back into my world, where it's like, now I'm playing with, especially as they got to that age where it's like, you get to experience life with your kids, you're screwing around with your kids, you're having fun with them. And, just kind of bring, like, you're almost reliving your childhood, and having that enjoyment and fun. And, but it just seems like today, man, a lot of people just aren't taking the time to have fun, to go out there and laugh. And, it's like, I don't know. I heard a quote one time of, don't take life. It might have even been Mark Twain. I don't know who it was, but don't take life too seriously. You're not getting out alive, or something like that. Like,
yeah.
So it's like, I mean, do you think that that's part of it too? Is like, we're just, I don't know. It's like you get, the older that you get, it's like, oh, life's serious, got to take it serious. And I get there are serious elements to it. We don't want to starve and, whatever, but it's like, also like, we kind of forget to have fun. And then we start seeking shit that isn't really fun, or like when I quit drinking, it was almost like I felt like the analogy I always tell is like, I got in a car wreck and I had to relearn how to walk, almost. Like, it was like a lot of the shit I would do, I would tolerate it because it was okay, because we'd be drinking and then have fun. But it's like, if I wasn't drinking, I didn't want to do that thing. So I had to go through and figure out, like, okay, what's fun to me? Like, what are the activities I don't need this substance to go out there and do? And it was, it was I don't know, a good indicator, and allowed me to really get it back in, not just get back into, but establish hobbies that like really fed my soul, that I don't need some silly fucking dumb substance to make me enjoy this thing, because I enjoy it so much and it provides me so much energy and, I don't know, life force, if you will, that I don't need this silly substance, but I was, kind of sugarcoating it with that. And I didn't realize that I didn't enjoy this shit, or even with people, I was like, well, okay, I could get together with those people, but I had to have alcohol involved. Okay. That must mean then I don't really enjoy the company of those people.
Right, because you have to escape.
But do you think that has something to do, an element of it, of, people just kind of forget to enjoy life and have a little bit of fun?
100%, especially if part of your definition of an ultimate life is to enjoy it, right? I think that sometimes we have this fallacy that we're fed, and I don't know where it comes from, but it's that success is reserved for the serious, right? It's only the people who are like serious. And sometimes I watch it, like I'll see these speakers and, I know they're making money off of their books and their talks, but they wear the nice suit and then they tell people like, don't have friends, don't have fun. That's how we got to the top. And I get what they're trying to say, be discerning about the company you keep. But sometimes I think that's misunderstood. So like, oh, okay, if I want to have, $1 million life, $1 billion life, or whatever your version of success is, I got to get rid of all fun. Right? If I want to have an amazing body, I can't eat anything that I like, right? So there's all this like pain and punishment that we associate with getting to the top. And while discipline is very important, I totally agree with you. The component that's missing to create the harmony in your life is fun and playfulness. Like you said, you look at these little kids and what they get right is that they know how to like let go and enjoy. And I think that's the hardest part, right? In order to have fun and to play, there has to be an element that says, I trust life enough in this moment that I can let go of control. Because what makes it fun is you're not trying to control everything. So there's a trust element. And I think that's what's missing for a lot of people. We don't trust that life will take care of us, right? We've got to be in control of everything. So I can't just let go right now and have fun. I don't have time to. I've got to make money or whatever other thought process. So I think the underlying fear there is if I can't just let go in this moment, I don't know how to let go anymore. I'm always in control of everything. But if that's the mindset and if that's what you've been trained on, like you're right, you're not going to have the joy, the fun that you're looking for. That's why they always say, "Oh, save it for retirement." It's like the worst mindset you can have is that only in retirement are you going to get to relax. You should be relaxing now. Like relaxation, sleep, pause, stillness, and I talk about this a lot, is part of this journey. I recently trained for my very first marathon last summer, as an example. And I've never ran a marathon before, never ran 26.2 miles. I was freaking out. And I don't consider myself a runner. Now I do. But I remember when my coach gave me my training plan, I worked with a marathon coach. I was actually really surprised at it. I thought I'd be having to run, 10 miles a day, like for the next 4 months just to build up to 26.2 miles, right? It's just like, I just thought I'd have to go hard. When I saw the training plan, it blew my mind because it was like the first day on my training plan was rest day. I was like, rest day? I haven't even started anything, but it said rest day. So, all right. And he said, just follow the plan, Kamille. And I was like, okay. Then the second day was like a 2-mile run. And I was like, all right, cool. And the third day was another rest day. And I was like, but I got energy. I could run again tomorrow. He goes, don't. And then the following day, there was like a 3-mile run. And then every week, you do something called a long run. So every Sunday I would do a longer run. And so my first long run was like 4 miles. I was like, okay, that's not bad. And then the next week it was like 5 miles. So there was always kind of like a small 10% buildup. And then the following week, it went back down to 4 miles. I was like, wait, no, something's wrong with this plan. That's a typo. I think I'm supposed to be building up. And he goes, no, follow the plan. So he tapered it. Everything was made so that I would be able to run the marathon injury-free. So there's a science behind getting to that sort of accomplishment and level, because nobody just wakes up one day and can just run 26.2 miles unless you've been doing this for a while, right? So I call it the marathon mindset. There was a tapering up. And you know what was interesting about that plan? I never actually ran 26 miles when I trained. The longest run I ever did was 20 miles or 21 miles. And I remember asking him, I was like, is that enough? Like, shouldn't I actually run the marathon? He goes, no one ever runs the marathon before the marathon. The minute you hit 21 miles, you can make 26 miles. So the reason I'm saying this is because I was surprised at how much rest was involved in that process to be a peak performance athlete. Well, for me, that was peak performance, to run 26.2 straight. And I hit my goals. I had 3 goals, I remember. My first goal was finish injury-free. Didn't care what the time was. I just wanted to finish. I didn't want to be a DNF. So DNF means do not finish, because I was training for 4 months. I was like, there's no way I'm not going to not finish. The second goal was to get, I think, under like a 12-minute mile if I could, because my very first mile I ran took me 12 minutes. So I was like, hey, if I can run under 12, that's great. And my super, super stretch goal was to run it in 4.5 hours. So 4 hours and 30 minutes. And I hit my first 2 goals. So I was super, super happy. But I was only able to hit that level of peak performance accomplishment because of the rest and the fun in between. And he said it. He was like, have fun. Like some runs, just have fun. Don't take it too seriously. So there's definitely something to that. When you look at people who are performing at the highest levels of their life, they've learned to incorporate fun. A great example of this is Richard Branson. When you look at his life, he is literally the embodiment of fun. I've got a mentor who's a good friend of his. And when they go to his island, Necker Island, they say the first thing he does every morning is he runs straight into the ocean, jumps into it, and then plays tennis for like 4 hours a day. And then they said, and this wasn't something like he started to do because he had money. He's always been like that. They said the way he built his businesses was through playfulness and fun. So you're right. If someone is listening right now and they're like, yeah, I have 0 fun in my life, how do I even figure out what that is? Again, give yourself permission to actually have a day where you just do what you want. So if you're like, you know what, I've always wanted to blank, do that blank. whatever that is. Because like you said, what's the point? If you clock out tomorrow in life and you never had any fun with it, why did you do all of this? What was the meaning behind all of it? So totally agree. Absolutely.
Yeah, and one of the issues anymore is, and this has probably been for a long time, and maybe it's always been an issue because I know there's always distractions out there. But I got this question this past Monday during our weekly coaching call, and somebody was asking me about purpose, and I'm like, dude, the first step is you got to quit being so, like, we're so busy just being busy, and I'm like, the first step, like, you got to be able to listen to that inner voice or whatever you want to call it, right? Like you gotta be able to take that pause, have time in solitude. And, I believe that a lot of the answers are within and are like, we'll know what's right when it's right. But if we don't take the time to slow down, to even listen to our own thoughts and our own feelings and whatever, it's very difficult to go out there and figure out what the hell that we want. Because then there are either other people's thoughts or, it's just bouncing around so much. And anymore, when I say we gotta stop being so busy, just being busy. I'm not like, I get it. We all have busy work lives. I got 3 kids. It's like, it's cheer competitions, practices, football games, it's just go, 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 plus running multiple businesses. I get that there's busyness of that. But even when we're not busy, we're busy, we're doing it. Like we don't, so, the first part of that, like when you talk about, okay, start thinking back and reflecting about your childhood. Well, that takes that time, as you mentioned, rest, pause. You got to lower the pressure, lower the noise, and be able to get into that solitude, framework and so forth, and be able to focus in the right way. But we're more so than any time, right? And I believe that this is just exacerbating through the exponential growth of technology. It's just going to get worse and worse and worse. And if people don't learn how to control their focus, dude, like, and this is why one of the reasons why I think that this is becoming, like, I'm getting this question more and more than I ever have in the past, of what I want and so forth. Cause like people just have, I'll challenge people with, I'll just, I'm okay. Just like start with sitting in a room for 5 minutes a day by yourself, no technology on, not like just full silence by yourself 5 minutes a day. People are like, dude, that's like impossible. It's so hard, and I get it in the beginning. Yeah. And that will, build up, but for people that are just like, this is just a distraction, that whole squirrel, and how do people regain that focus and to just be able to not be so busy, just being busy for no reason?
Yeah. And you're right. You have to start there. There's a saying that I often talk about in my coaching. It's power in the pause. So there is great power in the pause. And when I say power, your personal power, again, your clarity, your ability to like actually have energy to do the things you want to do. Most people are running on empty and they don't even realize it. Like they're at the end already, but they're just so used to moving. They're afraid of not moving because if they don't, then the engine will finally give way, right? So they just keep moving. So nobody notices that they're actually on empty. And let me start first with why I think people don't want to sit still. And then I'll kind of go into the ways you can do that. So the example I often like to give is imagine a body of water. And when water is moving a lot, so let's say think of a rushing rapid or rushing river or an ocean where, the wave is crashing. It's really beautiful, right? But when the water is moving that much, you can't really see what's beneath the surface, right? Because all the water is moving. But then when the water stops, and let's say this is a beautiful clear lake or like, again, an ocean where you can see right through. Once the water is still, then you can see what's beneath the surface, right? Well, a lot of people don't want to be still because the truth is they don't want to see what's beneath the surface. They know that if I sit still right now and I actually be with my thoughts, it's not going to be good. Like I don't want to be alone with my thoughts. And if that is something you're thinking right now, that is the person, you are the person who needs to really start processing those thoughts, right? The fact that you're trying to be busy to avoid sitting still because you don't want to see what's beneath the surface is the reason you want to look what's beneath the surface, right? Avoiding it is not going to add to your evolution and your growth as an individual, the place you want to go. And now for the person who is like, oh, actually, I never thought of that I finally get to see what's beneath the surface, meaning in your heart, in your mind, actually figure out what you want. That's why you need to sit still. No wonder I didn't know what I wanted. I was never still long enough to think. And this is something that when you look at some of the greatest writers, creators, inventors of our time, it came from their time going away, being in isolation, being in solitude, because you have so much power when you pause. That's what I'm saying, is literally the entire power of that creates the universe is inside of you, but you can't access it because you're so distracted by everybody else's plans for your life. So the way you take your power back, your autonomy, your clarity, your agency, is by stillness, because it's the one thing you can control is, oh, this is my time for me. And so I would say, yes, start there. Literally 5 minutes by yourself, put your phone on airplane mode and just sit. If it's too much, go outside and do it, because sometimes being outdoors can be very helpful, right? At least hearing the natural sounds of nature, but getting used to being by yourself. Now, if you struggle with it, if you're like, oh, I'm trying to grab my phone, then I want you to recognize you have an addiction, right? I know that everybody looks at alcohol, drugs as addiction. This is also an addiction now. Like, these things give as much of a dopamine hit than a slot machine. Like, somebody who's a gambleaholic and they go and they gamble and they're like, oh my gosh, this is great. This is great. This is doing the same thing to our minds right now. So if you can't even be away from this for 5 minutes, that means this has control over you. And that's, again, why I say there's power in the pause. You have to take your power back. And how do you do that? Pause, get away from this thing. Like, this thing should not be running you. But unfortunately, it has for a lot of us. And we don't even know it, right? We think, it's marketed as like, hey, man, you're going to be able to access the world and connect people. And yes, it has that capability. But for a lot of entrepreneurs, people in general, especially real estate agents that I work with, this has become their boss instead of them becoming the boss. So one of the first things I coach on in my programs is I tell them, like, this is your assistant. You have to treat this like your assistant, not your boss. Because I hear it all the time. They're like, I can't survive without this thing. I have to, everyone needs me. And I'm like, no, this is supposed to help you. You are the boss. You are the thing that connects to people using this. This is assisting you to connect, but this shouldn't be the one guiding the direction of your life. And so pausing is more than just sitting and meditating and feeling better. It's literally about taking your power back, because you've given your power away to every app, every ad, every email that comes through this thing. They have you. They control you. So pausing, sitting in stillness, interestingly enough, is an act of defiance in this world that's trying to get your attention all the time. It's your way of saying, you know what? No, I'm in control of my life. I get to design and create it the way that I want. And it starts in sitting in stillness. It is the biggest rebellious act you can take right now in a world of distraction and overconsumption and overload of information. So hopefully that helps you shift your perspective on why be still, why sit in a room for 5 minutes in silence. What's the point of that? So that you can take your control back, because you don't even realize that you don't have control over your life anymore if you don't even have 5 minutes to sit silently with yourself. Like, if you don't even like being with yourself, well, why would anybody else want to be around you, right? So, and I get it, because I also had a hard time in the very beginning sitting by myself. I didn't want to hear my thoughts, but that was how I knew that means those are the thoughts I have to face. And then that might give you the awareness and the clarity you need to work with a professional, be it a coach, a counselor, a therapist, but you do need to probably process some of that with another person. So,
yeah. Well, one of the things I learned from you early on, and I don't want to say the most powerful thing, because I've learned so many powerful things from you, but it was definitely, it's one of them. I mean, this was such an eye opener for me and such a game changer, was that success is internal. It's never external, and whether that be happiness, whether it be, however anybody can define success, how they want to define success. And, one of the things when we first started working together, I'm like, Kamille, I don't know what's wrong with me, man. I've financially, I'm good. I got money in the bank. I've got so financially, like in a great spot that a lot of people would love to be in that spot. I'm like, I got an amazing wife that loves me. I got amazing kids. I got amazing friends. I got amazing teammates, but I'm like, I'm still miserable, right? It was like, and I remember telling you, like, if I'm not winning in business, then I'm depressed. It was only if my business was growing, I was winning in business, but the second that whatever, then I just get into this like dark place. And I'm like, I have every reason to be fulfilled, but I'm not fulfilled, but it was I was going outward, not inward. I wasn't letting the water be still, like you're mentioning. And, if people don't take that time to figure out what inner happiness, fulfillment, success, however they want to define that is for them, and what kind of work they need to do with that, then they're going to always be chasing external and never find it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, it's interesting because, so one of the things that I do in my group, I have a subsection of my clientele that are all very faith-based. So they're a lot more spiritual. And right now I do these twice monthly calls called spiritual strategy, because that's about the inner work. And right now we're reading the book of Ecclesiastes, and it's really amazing because they say the one who wrote the book of Ecclesiastes is King Solomon. Now, King Solomon was known as possibly the richest, wisest man that ever walked this planet. And he's written a couple of wisdom books in ancient scripture. And the interesting thing about Ecclesiastes, they say, if he was the one that wrote it, he must have written it towards the end of his life, because it has such a different tone from the other books that he wrote, which were a lot more positive, more wisdom filled. Ecclesiastes almost is like this gnarly, pessimistic guy who's like, life is meaningless. Literally, the whole book opens up with meaningless, everything is meaningless. What's the point in it all? And at the end of just the first chapter alone, he says, the more knowledge and wisdom I gained, the more suffering I felt. And imagine, this is somebody who had everything for that time, literally all the gold, all the stuff. He explored everything, had access to all of the information. In fact, he had like 300 wives and 700 concubines. I don't even know why he would want 1,000 partners, but whatever. So had everything. And he said, and none of it mattered. He's like, our life is like a vapor. It's like a mist. And this is someone who was able to explore all of life at that time and still said, the sun rises, the sun sets, none of it matters. It all goes away. So it's so negative. And it's only till the end of the book that he realizes, what, the only thing that ever mattered was God. That was his conclusion from that, was his relationship with the thing that created the entire universe. Because he's like, my money's going to fade away. All of this is going to fade away. Nothing ever gave me any fulfillment. None of my wives, none of my life, until I had a relationship with the spirit, this thing that just created all of the world. And when he got in touch with that on the inside, that's, he said, the only thing that gave him fulfillment. And so it's interesting because as you read a lot of these ancient writings, be it Solomon or other philosophers, they all talk about that thing that no one can see, feel, or touch, but it's there. Some people call it love. Some people call it love. Some people call it spirit. But when you're able to tap into that, and that's why I say there's power in the pause, because that only comes from stillness. That's when that feeding of the human soul that everyone's looking for comes from. And you can't get it from external things. There's no amount in your bank account that's going to give you that. I talk to millionaires all the time who tell me that. They're like, Kamille, I'm making this much, everything's good. Why am I not happy? And it freaks them out. And I tell them, when was the last time that you were still? When were you in solitude? They're like, I don't have time for all that woo-woo BS. Like, that stuff doesn't work. And I was like, okay, so you complaining to me about why you can't find fulfillment. And there's this one thing you haven't tried. Why not? And I think sometimes the reason is because they actually know deep inside that is going to be the path. But the hard thing about that path, and I'm being honest with anyone who's listening to this, it's not tangible. Like, I wish I could say like it's quantitative. You can measure how happy you are in a number, but you can't. It's like an ongoing process, always connecting to within, that piece of you. Again, what we call love. In fact, there's a movie, I just watched it. It's, I think, a 2016 movie called Collateral Beauty. Have you seen it?
Mm-mm.
So it's interesting. All-star cast. Will Smith is the lead role. Helen Mirren, Edward Norton, Keira Knightley, lots of great people. But basically, and I won't spoil it, but he is this ad marketing guru, Will Smith. He owns this huge company, grew the company. And then later in life, his 6-year-old daughter passes away. And he just devastates him, ruins him. Like, he has no reason to live anymore. And he goes into sort of this like zombie-like state for 2 years. Now, his partners in business are just struggling to keep the business alive because he's created this great ad agency empire. He was known as the head of it, but now he's just walking around like depressed all the time. He can't find the meaning to life. And there were always 3 things he talked about in all of his marketing messages, which became his philosophy of life. The only 3 guarantees that people are looking for is love, time, and death. And he goes, that death is the inevitability, time is the thing that's going to pass, and love isn't everything. And as the movie goes on, he starts writing these letters to love, time, and death, not to people, but he's so mad at them. because of the loss of his daughter. And I'm going to leave you all to the movie to watch so you can figure out what happens in the end. But it's this journey of this man trying to figure out, what is the point of life when love, time, and death both cheated me, eluded me? And there are 3 actors who come in and play love, time, and death and have these great conversations with him. But I bring this up because it's those deep conversations, only until you sit down in stillness and start thinking about these concepts, that's going to give you the purpose and the fulfillment you're looking for. And again, if your thought right now is, Kamille, I don't have time to sit down and think about these things, I got to go make money, then you've missed the point, right? Again, you can always make money, but at the end of your life, and we read this all the time, end of life stories, people sitting in nursing homes, people who've worked in bereavement centers, or I forgot the name of the places, but where folks are already dying, palliative care places. No one ever talks about, oh, I wish I worked that extra shift. I wish I had a better credit score. I wish I had a little bit more money in my bank account. No, it's always about the relationships in their life. Nothing matters more than the relationships you have. It's like, I wish I told my daughter this. I wish I told my husband this. I wish I spent more time here. I should have pursued that thing I always wanted to pursue. So again, when you start thinking about death from that perspective, like, end of life, what would I want to be remembered by? And you work backwards, reverse engineer it, you'll find your purpose. One of my favorite exercises that I do on a self-retreat, talk about power in the pause. Every year, my husband and I we go on individual self-retreats, and then now we're starting a couple self-retreat to kind of combine our goals together, just a way for us to get clarity on what we want to do moving forward in family life, which is great, by the way, for anybody who does have a family listening to this. Don't just make your business goals, as a family unit, what are your goals? What are your visions together too? Because remember, if you're not growing, you're dying. So we're all very much driven by growth, something to look forward to. So when we go on our self-retreat, one of the exercises I do is something called the self-eulogy. And it's a very revealing exercise, because in a self-eulogy, you have to pretend that you've passed away before everybody else in your life. So my husband's still alive, my mom's still alive, my cousins, my best friend, and all of that. And then I write their eulogy at my funeral based off what I would want them to say about me. So now I'm writing what I want Isaac, my husband, to say about me if I had already passed away. And that's a tough exercise. I'm not writing what I think he'll say. I'm writing what I want him to say. So the things I want him to say about the type of wife I am, the type of best friend I am, the type of person, mother, whatever, I'm writing that. And why these exercises are so powerful is because when you read those self-eulogies, it tells you what type of person you actually want to be. And then I ask myself the question, am I currently living the life that would lead me to becoming this woman? And if I'm not, then I go, okay, something needs to change, right? So if I'm saying stuff like, yeah, she always had the best, whatever, mac and cheese. And I'm like, I don't even know how to make mac and cheese. Why is it so important for me to have the best mac and cheese in the family? All right, I better start learning how to make mac and cheese, because apparently that's important to me. So that's another exercise you can do to figure out, what is it that I want inevitably out of life? By looking forward, as morbid as it is, to your death, you can design your ideal life. So hopefully that wasn't too sad, but it's kind of the truth, right? Again, this is why this work is so important. I think it's also why I have a business, is because most of us are not taught to think this way. We all go to school, we're told to memorize things. Here's your subject matter. And when I think about it, having fun is never really part of our curriculum in school or, in college, where we say, okay, you can go to recess now. But then even that feels like a punishment. It's like, okay, but the minute the bell's over, no more fun for you. Back to not having fun. Like, what if we changed it and we literally had a class that was just all about, hey, this is just fun 101. Everybody do what you want, innovate what you want. Like, it would just change the game in the way we trained ourselves growing up.
Yep. 100%. Yeah. And I like to keep things simple because it's just, how my dumb mind can grasp things, but it's, like, okay, the purpose of life. Like, I don't try to figure out the purpose of life, right? It's, to me, I look at, okay, purpose of life. And I just stole this from Alan Watts, but is to live, to live life, right? To experience life. Okay. Well, what are the experiences that I want to experience? Like what makes me truly happy? But that does take time of, there was a time where I thought going to the bar with some buddies would make me happy, but that wasn't what truly made, like, you got to really, take that time, because we can't do everything. We can't have all the experiences.
Right.
So it is kind of listening, okay, well, what are those experiences that matter most to you? And, taking that time. And, one thing that you said this last week, because, you come on once a month to share your brilliance and coach, all my coaching clients and my staff and teammates and so forth. And, one thing that you were talking about this last week, when it came to talking about focus and so forth, you said a quote of, we're exiting from the information age to force and see if I have this right. Information age to force fed consumption age,
Yeah.
right. And I misstated that, but what does that mean? And what is the era that we're in, and how does that relate to when it comes to guarding our focus? Because like, I remember, if you ask anybody that's created massive success, and I'm talking like, like the Warren Buffetts, the Bill Gates, Steve Jobs used to always talk about this, but they all say that focus is the most important thing to creating big success.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure a professional athlete, Olympic athlete, they'll all tell you the same thing. So when I'm not speaking of just financial success, any element of success is focus, and you got to guard focus if your life depends on it, because it does, right? So,
Yeah.
so what do you mean by that? And how are ways in this crazy world, digital world that we're in, that people can, because we got to combat this. I know you use that term war, this war that we're in now. It's an internal war. It doesn't mean like we're out there, physically fighting a war, but it's a war that we are physically fighting with the outside world to be able to guard our focus.
100%. So, of course, I am by no means an economist or a sociologist, but I am somebody who likes to observe patterns. So, I studied psychology, but I also studied mass communications. And in my subject matter focus there was really how mass information influences people on, again, a grand level, right? So, I studied leaders like Martin Luther King Jr., Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Hitler, Mussolini, to see like what was it that they were doing that had large groups of people all kind of thinking, moving in the same direction. So even when I observe kind of our world today, I like to look at that, like what are we all doing as a society that's having us moving, thinking in kind of a mass direction. And I was born in the 80s, so school for me was, hey, there's now a computer. I'm not like analog anymore completely, but we went into the computer, so we learned how to type. We literally had typing class. Then we had a class that taught you how to search on the internet, right? So we learned how to seek information because we were on the advent of the information age, right? The 90s internet, we had dial-up, then we eventually had, I forgot what it's called, DSL and like all these things. And then now super, super fast, right? So I saw this transition from, oh, we can go get information in what we called the information age to probably in the past, I'd say like 10 years now, I'm seeing this huge shift where it's not about finding information anymore, because now information is coming to you whether you like it or not, right? I was still in Facebook when Facebook was reserved only if you had a college email address. Now everybody's on Facebook, everybody's on TikTok, everybody's on Instagram, like all of these things, and everything is coming at you. Like phones now wasn't you flip open and you call a number. Now it's a mini computer, a second brain. So the reason I say we're transitioning from the information age is because I saw our behavior as a society shifting from let's go search for data and information to it's coming at you whether you like it or not. Everybody's got a microphone, everybody's got a TV show, everybody's got a podcast, and everybody's going to have say on this particular thing. So I don't know anymore who is a credible source, who isn't a credible source, what's the truth, what's not the truth, because there's no barrier to entry. Before, right, the people with the microphone, the people who could get on a radio show had to have some sort of credential to get into those places. If you wanted to be on mass media, you had to be on the news or on a network. Now I can do it, right? And I'm not saying that I'm not credible, but I'm also not that credible to be speaking on certain subjects. But if I wanted to, I could. And then as long as I've got a following, people listen to me, right? And that's why there's all this controversy with people like a Joe Rogan or whoever, because he's got so much of a following. But is he really the right credible source to listen to when it comes to this subject matter? He might have an opinion, but is it a valuable opinion for that subject matter? Because he's not the expert on it, nor is he the scientist. So I get it. And so as we get into this force-fed consumption age, because again, you don't have to go to the information. It's coming to you whether you like it or not. The image I keep getting in my mind is like, Unfortunately, those farms where they're like force feeding chickens and then the chickens get really, really big, I'm afraid that's going to happen to us. It's going to happen to you if you're not careful, right? You're going to get inundated with information. You're getting it now. You open up your feed, boom, it's there. You open up your email, every ad, every webinar, every person's telling you this is how you got to live life. This is how you do it. And if you don't get good at, as Jim Rohn says, guarding the door of your mind, having the filters to make sure you don't get force fed stuff that you don't want to get force fed, you're going to get caught up in living everybody else's agenda now more than ever. That's always been a human thing, to stay focused and not get distracted by others. But I really believe now you're walking into a minefield of just people inundating you with information, true or not. So the skill set I think that we need to teach ourselves currently, and especially the younger generation, is how do you filter information, credible versus not credible, worthy of your time and attention versus not worthy of your time and attention, because you're already in this war field of distraction. So you've got to have all the weaponry, all the armor that's going to help you stay in like your lane more than ever. And that's why I say power in the pause is essential, because number one, you got to figure out what your lane is, right? Where is the destination you want to go to? Get clear first, because once we get clarity there, then when we start embarking on this battle, this journey, whatever you want to call it, then we can start creating the guardrails that keep unnecessary information out. Like, okay, that's cool. I'm glad everyone's doing that, but has nothing to do with where I want to go with my business. Or, okay, that's great that that realtor is doing that, but that has nothing to do with the strategy I want to implement at my company. Or that's great that that person's doing that with their family, but that's not a value for me and my marriage or me and my family. So that I think is going to be the thing you're going to have to build a skill set off, is filtering and making sure you've got your guardrails up so you don't get caught up in the distraction. And that's why I think people are so exhausted, is because just so much is being force fed to them and they're just full of nothing, right? Nothing that actually fulfills them. That's why we say we're tired, we're busy, we're exhausted. But for what? Because none of it was actually fulfilling to you. So getting clear on that is going to be vital, because there's just going to be more information. There's going to be more technology. And as you and I were talking, we get into this metaverse or whatever the next level is going to be, right? Web 3.0, where people are now in this thing. They're not even in the real world anymore, right? They're in this virtual world. There's going to be even more disconnection and more distraction. And that's why I say stillness, your personal solitude, getting in touch here is going to be the greatest act of rebellion and defiance to the sort of distraction-filled world that's out here. That's everybody else's agenda. But what is yours? Like, what is it that you truly want for you in your life? Getting in touch with that, getting in tune with that, that's going to be just like the greatest gift you can give to yourself and to your family and to your team if you're building a business, because you're leading by example, because they want the same thing. But if you're not doing that, then they're just going to follow suit. Right? One of my favorite Ralph Waldo Emerson quotes that I tell every CEO that I work with is that every great organization is the over lengthened shadow of one person's character. Right. And so even with Josh, when I was coaching you, I always knew that GSD mode and every other business that you built, Revista Real Estate, your companies, your software, all of it was simply an extension of one aspect of your character. So if something in that business wasn't, let's say, to your liking, if we really, really want to get to the root cause, other than fixing the sort of strategic problem, it was all going to come from you. So what part of you was starting to feel that way, do that? How do we need to balance that out? You know, who do you need to collaborate with to compensate for that part of you that doesn't have that? And there's nothing wrong with it. None of us can have everything, right? There are things that I'm not good at that I need other people for. And then having that awareness that, oh, my business is just an extension of me. So what's going on with me? What do I need to look at? You're the root of all of this. So yeah, it's tough at this consumption age. And I mean, again, I don't have kids yet. You would be more to speak on this, Josh, but like when I see all the distractions they have to deal with this, I feel for them to some degree. I'm like, man, there's a new skill set that these kids are going to need to learn so they don't get caught up in what the powers that be, whatever that is telling them to think or do and say, right? They have to have their own self-agency and really get very clear on who they are so they can navigate this new world of information that's just getting force fed to them. So
yeah, it's nuts. I heard a statistic the other day that in a 24-hour period of time, we are fed more information than, early 1900s, a person would be in their whole lifetime. Right. So, I mean, but we, our minds, we can't necessarily process it. We can't even, it's just information overload. And then, my biggest fear of all of this is people getting to the point where there just is no longer a natural thought, or just, and this has been going on forever. I mean, because, you and I both have studied, mass marketing and mass psychology. And, it's like, look, the only way for GDP to continue to grow, with all these companies that are wanting to grow and grow and grow, is they have to sell everybody more shit. And they have to, it's called cognitive dissonance, right? Like make you feel that you need 12 pairs of shoes when you don't need 12 pairs of shoes, or, whatever it means, so we always become in this internal battle, where, do we really want that stuff? Or do we just, is their own thoughts are even, but if we don't take that time to really think and practice our critical thinking skills, skills that can dissipate very quickly. Yeah. It's I'm banning any VR, that crap, cause I'm thinking about that all the time with my kids. I'm like, how do we combat this? So, we're moving this summer and, buying some land and some property. And I'm like, dude, at this, like everything's gonna be hardwired in. We're not gonna have any Wi-Fi. So yeah, there's still going to be technology our kids use, but I'm like, how do we, how do I also minimize that where they still have to, live a different, so it's like they're going to learn to garden and, other things and other skill sets that may be helpful in the future or not. It's like they live this city life first half of their life. Now let's go live this other life. And, but to try to combat that as much as we can. And, I'm involved with I go through, okay, what are you learning in school? What are those assignments? Right. Okay. What are you learning? What does your teacher say about this? Well, what do you think about this? And, get them thinking in different manners and different ways, but it's, we got to pay attention, dude.
Yeah, 100%. And one of the things about peak performance, the reason that I use this particular title, if you will, is that in order to get you as an individual or a leader to their level of peak performance, part of that is the preservation of energy. I see that 80% of my job is helping you to preserve energy. We have limited resources, limited energy, limited intellectual capacity, emotional capacity in a day, right? And when there's too much that's pulling from you or draining from you unnecessarily, that's where, again, I like to talk to people about, okay, look, you're giving way too much energy here, or this conversation doesn't really need that. Because all we're doing is kind of plugging the holes to see, like, okay, with the limited energy you have today, or even this week, where is going to be the place of highest contribution, as Greg McKeown talks about in Essentialism? Where is that going to be for you? And making sure, again, you don't get distracted or leak energy to all the wrong things. Because I think that's one of our biggest issues, is we're just spending way too much time on all the wrong things and then blaming those things for why we don't have a great life. And I talk about how the three things that you have control over, 100% control over, the APCs of control, and the only three things you ever have control over is your attitude, your perspective, and your choices. That's it. So anything else that we try to control, other people's opinions of us, thoughts, optics, whatever, I understand they have their place, but you have to remember you don't have full control over it. And when you can come to accept that, it's going to free you. And if you can just remember them, but the thing I do have 100% control over is my attitude in this moment. What, am I going to be pissy about this, or am I going to be grateful? What is my perspective on this situation? And if you can't see it from another angle, have somebody else help you see it from another angle, right? That's why I talk about how I'm often a perception enhancement specialist, because I'm just helping you to perceive things differently, because that can lead to a different destination. And then at the end of the day, your choice. It's always up to you what you want to do. In Atomic Habits, the author James Clear, and I love this part of the book, he talks about how often we overestimate the external aspect of choice, which is our options. Everyone always talks about, well, what are my options? What are my options? I don't have any options. And then we underestimate and undervalue the internal aspect of choice, which is our action. And you have to remember that choice is a verb. It's not the options. Those are the external aspect of choice. The internal aspect of choice is that you get to choose. So when you focus on the fact that I am either choosing or not choosing in this moment, that's what you need to focus on. That needs to be the aspect, right? You don't ever have to do something, you get to do something. A small shift in your mindset, small linguistic shift, but massive difference in how you approach things. And for the leaders that I coach, it's always important that you remember that you have 100% responsibility for every choice that you make. Like, you are not the victim. Now, I understand there are moments where, yes, something may have unfairly happened to you, and I get that. But in that moment, again, you still have your APCs. Even if you were the victim to a situation, you still get to choose your attitude, your perspective, and your choice. Famous example, Nelson Mandela, while he was in prison, right, not his fault, is also when he wrote all of the letters to free his people, right? Like, he still chose to spend that time. He said, I wasn't in prison, I was in preparation for what was to come, right? So imagine that mindset, his attitude, his perspective on why he was there. He saw it as like, great, I have solitude to think, right? Instead, he could just said, I'm in prison, what the F? Why did they do this to me? This is so unfair. And then he wastes that time. And so again, I'm not minimizing anyone's experience if you are in a dark place right now or something has happened to you, but I want to empower you and remind you that you have still more agency than you realize. You've got more control than you realize. It's just that the things you can control, APC, attitude, perspective, choice. Once you get a handle on that, look what Mandela was able to create. I mean, from prison, he was able to lead his people, right? So if the human mind can do that, great. You also have the same human mind. You're capable of so much more. So just remembering that, because I think we give too much of our power away to, again, external forces.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Love it. Awesome stuff. And I'm just being cognizant of time. I know you got a coaching call coming up here quickly. So, before we go here, for those that are listening that want to continue to follow, I know you put out a lot of great content out there. You also have some amazing coaching programs. Again, you've been my personal one-on-one coach for over 5 years now, crazy. Since 2017, which it's crazy to think it's been that long, but it's been an amazing ride. And then you also do group coaching, like, I bring you in and you group coach, my coaching clients and so forth, but you have group coaching with your own clientele as well. So there's options, right? Whether you want to do group coaching or have that one-on-one support from you. You also have, I believe, that you do twice a year, your 100 Days to Focus challenge. That is, an amazing program. I have so many coaching clients that have been through it and so forth as well, and said so many amazing things about it. So for those that want to learn more about that, like, what are the best places to go do all that at?
Yeah. Two best places. The first one I'm going to tell you to go to is on YouTube. Subscribe to my channel. So just look up Coach Kamille Rose, and that's Kamille with a K, Kamille. So if you just put Coach Kamille Rose, subscribe to the channel, because I would want you to watch my content first, just the free coaching videos. And if you like my style, if you vibe with it, then go to the website, theultimatelife.com. It's spelled right there, LYFE.com, and subscribe to the newsletter, because that way you'll get updated with all of my free events, my webinars, when I do paid events. And then also, like you said, Josh, if you want to join my 100 Days of Focus, it's a live challenge I do twice a year just for the ultra committed. I consider this kind of like my marathon training for entrepreneurs who want to get hyper focused, because we only do one business goal and one personal goal through those 100 days. So it's a whole thing on just making sure that you don't get distracted in this force-fed consumption world, and you create the skills you need to make sure, man, I've got some solid filters and gutters so I can just create my own version of the ultimate life. So that starts in January. We're in one right now as we record this. Next one, I believe, is going to start in June or July. So again, YouTube, find me there, subscribe, and then join the mailing list when you go to the website. Yeah.
Awesome stuff. And anybody that's watching or listening to this, wherever you're at, we'll have links below too, to make it easy, where you can just scroll below, click the links, and go subscribe and go check out our website and all that great stuff. So Kamille, truly appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to be here. This has been amazing, my friend.
Awesome. I love it, Josh. And yeah, I will be with you until I retire. I promise that.
All right, right on. And those that are watching, listening, truly appreciate you guys being here and all of your support. Keep kicking ass, and we'll see you next time. Peace.
Peace, everybody.